The radio crackled with static in the early hours of November 15, 1982. Dispatch called out into the darkness, waiting for a response that would never come. Officer Marcus Thompson, badge number 247, had vanished without a trace from the very streets he had sworn to protect. Picture this. A seasoned patrol officer known for his reliability and dedication simply disappears during what should have been a routine night shift. No distress call, no signs of struggle, just gone. His patrol car would later be found abandoned, keys still in the ignition, radio still crackling with unanswered calls from his increasingly worried dispatcher. For 20 long years, the people of Cedar Falls would ask themselves the same haunting question. How does someone entrusted with keeping others safe simply vanish into thin air? How does a man who spent his career solving mysteries become the greatest mystery of all? The answer, when it finally came, would shake this small community to its core. Because sometimes the truth isn't just stranger than fiction. It's far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of Officer Marcus Thompson, a man who dedicated his life to serving others, only to become the victim of a crime so calculated, so deliberate, that it would take 2 decades and a twist of fate to uncover the shocking truth. It's a story that reminds us that evil can wear a familiar face, that danger can lurk where we least expect it, and that some secrets are buried so deep they seem destined to stay hidden forever. But secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they? And when Marcus Thompson's secret finally emerged from the shadows, it would reveal a web of deception, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder that reached into the very heart of the institution he served. Marcus Thompson wasn't born to be a police officer. He was called to it. Growing up in the small farming community of Cedar Falls, population 8,000, Marcus learned the values of hard work and community service from his father, a Vietnam veteran who worked double shifts at the local grain elevator to support his family. Marcus was the middle child of 3, sandwiched between his older sister Sarah, who would become a nurse, and his younger brother David, destined for a career in teaching. But while his siblings found their calling in healing and education, Marcus was drawn to protection and justice from an early age. His high school classmates remember him as the kid who broke up fights rather than starting them, who walked elderly neighbors home from the grocery store, and who spent his weekends volunteering at the fire department. Even then, there was something about Marcus that made people feel safe. He had this way of listening, really listening, when someone was in trouble, and an uncanny ability to diffuse tense situations with just the right words. After graduating in 1975, Marcus spent 4 years in the Army Military Police, serving with distinction in Germany during the final years of the Cold War. His commanding officers noted his exceptional judgment and his ability to connect with people from all walks of life. When he returned to Cedar Falls in 1979, the local police chief, a family friend named Robert Hartley, practically begged him to join the force. Marcus didn't need much convincing. He loved his hometown, and the idea of keeping its streets safe felt like a natural extension of everything he believed in. He enrolled in the police academy that fall, graduating second in his class 6 months later. By 1980, Officer Marcus Thompson had become a fixture in Cedar Falls. He knew every street, every family, every story that mattered. He was the officer who showed up to domestic disputes and somehow got everyone talking instead of fighting. He was the one who spent his lunch breaks shooting basketball with kids at the community center, and who never wrote a ticket without first making sure the driver understood why they'd been stopped. But Marcus's life wasn't all about the job. In 1981, he married his high school sweetheart, Jennifer Walsh, in a ceremony that seemed to include half the town. Jenny, a kindergarten teacher at Cedar Falls Elementary, shared Marcus's love for their community and his dream of raising a family there someday. Those who knew Marcus best say he was happiest during those early years of marriage. He and Jenny bought a small house on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the police station. They talked about children, about growing old together in the town they both loved. Marcus had even started building a workshop in the basement, where he planned to teach his future sons and daughters how to fix things with their hands just like his father had taught him. Yet beneath Marcus's steady exterior, those closest to him began to notice subtle changes in the months leading up to his disappearance. Jenny would later tell investigators that her husband had seemed troubled by something at work, though he never shared the details with her. He'd started taking longer routes home, checking his rearview mirror more often, and asking her to keep the doors locked even during the day. When pressed about what was bothering him, Marcus would simply say that police work was showing him sides of people he'd rather not see, but Jenny sensed it was more than that. Something specific was eating at him, something that made this naturally open man suddenly guarded and careful. November 15th, 1982, started like any other Tuesday in Cedar Falls. Marcus kissed Jenny goodbye at 6 p.m., grabbed his thermos of coffee, and headed to the station for his night shift. The weather was unseasonably warm for mid-November, and there was talk of a storm system moving in from the west, but nothing that seemed particularly threatening. At roll call, Sergeant Patricia Morse assigned Marcus to patrol the east side of town, a quiet residential area that included the high school, several churches, and the neighborhoods where many of the town's longtime families lived. It was considered one of the safer beats, the kind of assignment officers looked forward to on quiet weeknights. Marcus's first few hours were routine. At 7:23 p.m., he responded to a noise complaint on Birch Avenue, teenagers with their music too loud. At 8:45 p.m., he assisted with a minor fender bender outside the Dairy Queen. At 9:30 p.m., he conducted a welfare check on elderly Mrs. Patterson, whose daughter had called from out of state, worried because her mother wasn't answering the phone. Mrs. Patterson was fine. She'd simply fallen asleep watching television with her hearing aid turned off. The last official communication from Marcus came at 11:47 p.m. Dispatch records show he called in a routine status check from the vicinity of Cedar Falls High School. His voice was calm, professional, unremarkable in every way. He reported all quiet on his beat and estimated he'd be conducting a security check of the school grounds and surrounding area. Unit 247 to dispatch. The recording captured his familiar voice. Conducting routine patrol of the high school area, all quiet here. I'll be 10-8. Police code for in service and available. It was the last time anyone would hear from Marcus Thompson. What happened in the next hour remains one of the most puzzling aspects of this case. At 12:15 a.m., a passing motorist reported seeing a police cruiser parked in the faculty lot of Cedar Falls High School, engine running, headlights on. The witness, a night shift worker at the hospital named Robert Chen, thought nothing of it at the time. Officers routinely checked the school during their patrols. But when dispatch tried to raise Marcus on the radio at 12:30 a.m. for a routine check-in, there was no response. The dispatcher, a veteran named Helen Rodriguez, who had worked with Marcus for nearly 3 years, wasn't immediately concerned. Radio dead zones were common around the high school due to the building's steel construction. By 1 a.m., however, Helen was worried. Marcus was nothing if not reliable, and he always responded to radio calls within minutes. She dispatched another unit to check on him. Officer James Mitchell found Marcus's patrol car at 1:17 a.m., exactly where Robert Chen had reported seeing it 45 minutes earlier. The Crown Victoria sat empty in the faculty parking lot, driver's door slightly ajar, engine still running, headlights cutting through the darkness. The radio was turned on, crackling with Helen's increasingly urgent attempts to make contact. Inside the vehicle, everything appeared normal at first glance. Marcus's clipboard sat on the passenger seat with his patrol log filled out through 11:30 p.m. His coffee thermos, still warm, sat in the cup holder. His service weapon was missing from its holster, which wasn't unusual. Officers often carried their weapons when investigating potential problems. But there were details that didn't make sense. Marcus's flashlight lay on the ground outside the driver's door, its lens cracked as if it had been dropped. His radio was set to the wrong frequency, not the department's main channel, but a secondary frequency rarely used except for special operations. Most disturbing of all was what Officer Mitchell found when he walked the perimeter of the school building. Near the back entrance, he discovered Marcus's badge number 247, lying in the grass as if it had been torn from his uniform and tossed aside. The discovery of Marcus's abandoned patrol car triggered an immediate response that would quickly escalate into the largest search operation in Cedar Falls history. Within 30 minutes of Officer Mitchell's radio call, every available officer in the county was converging on Cedar Falls High School. Chief Robert Hartley arrived at the scene just after 2 a.m., his usual calm demeanor replaced by visible tension. Marcus wasn't just another officer to him. He was like a son, someone Hartley had personally recruited and mentored. The chief took one look at the abandoned cruiser and immediately called for backup from the state police. The initial search focused on the school grounds and the surrounding residential area. Officers spread out in a grid pattern, calling Marcus's name, checking every building, every alley, every possible hiding place. They found nothing. No signs of struggle beyond the dropped flashlight and discarded badge. No blood, no torn clothing, no indication of where Marcus might have gone or what might have happened to him. As dawn broke on November 16th, the search expanded. Volunteer firefighters joined the effort, along with civil defense teams and dozens of concerned citizens. They combed through the woods behind the school, dragged the retention pond, and methodically searched every abandoned building in a 5-mile radius. Jenny Thompson arrived at the command post around 6 a.m., still wearing her pajamas under her winter coat. The sight of her husband's empty patrol car hit her like a physical blow. Chief Hartley gently led her away from the scene, but not before she noticed something the investigators had missed. Marcus' wedding ring was still on the dashboard, where he always placed it before starting his shift. He said it kept the metal from scratching against his equipment. The ring's presence eliminated one possibility investigators had quietly considered, that Marcus might have staged his own disappearance. A man planning to vanish wouldn't leave behind the symbol of everything he claimed to love most. By noon on the 16th, the FBI had been notified. Special Agent Patricia Morrison arrived from the Chicago field office, bringing with her a team of specialists trained in missing persons cases. The federal involvement was both a blessing and a curse. It brought additional resources and expertise, but it also signaled that local authorities believed they were dealing with something far more serious than a simple disappearance. Agent Morrison's first briefing to the assembled search teams painted a grim picture. Based on the evidence at the scene, she said, they were likely dealing with an abduction. The positioning of the patrol car, the missing weapon, and the scattered personal effects all suggested that Marcus had been taken against his will. But taken by whom? And why? These questions would haunt the investigation from its very first hours. The FBI immediately began analyzing the physical evidence. The cracked flashlight yielded no fingerprints other than Marcus's own. The badge, found 20 feet from the patrol car, showed no signs of a struggle. It appeared to have been carefully removed rather than torn away. Most puzzling was the radio frequency change. Someone had deliberately switched Marcus's radio to a channel that would prevent him from communicating with dispatch. Investigators also discovered that Marcus's service weapon, a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver, was missing, along with the spare ammunition he carried on his duty belt. Either Marcus had drawn his weapon in defense, or his attacker had taken it as a precaution. As the hours turned to days, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Multiple witnesses reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles in the area around the high school in the days leading up to Marcus's disappearance. A white van with tinted windows, a dark sedan with out-of-state plates, a pickup truck that seemed to be conducting surveillance on police patrol routes. The implications were chilling. If these reports were accurate, Marcus's disappearance wasn't random. It was planned, calculated, and specifically targeted at him. The investigation into Marcus Thompson's disappearance quickly became a maze of promising leads that led nowhere, and suspicious circumstances that couldn't be proven. Within 72 hours, FBI Agent Morrison and Chief Hartley had identified over 24 potential suspects, ranging from recently paroled criminals to disgruntled citizens who'd had negative encounters with Marcus during his patrol duties. The first major lead came from an unexpected source. On November 18th, 3 days after Marcus vanished, a convicted felon named Tommy Briggs walked into the police station and demanded to speak with investigators. Briggs, who had been arrested by Marcus 6 months earlier on drug charges, claimed he had information about the disappearance. Sitting across from Agent Morrison in the station's cramped interview room, Briggs nervously chain-smoked and insisted he had nothing to do with Marcus's disappearance. But he had heard things, he said. Word on the street was that someone had put a price on Marcus's head. Though Briggs claimed he didn't know who or why, Thompson was asking too many questions, Briggs told investigators. Poking around in business that wasn't his concern. Someone wanted him gone, but it wasn't supposed to happen like this. It was supposed to look like an accident. The revelation that Marcus might have been targeted for his investigative work opened new avenues of inquiry. Investigators began combing through his recent cases, looking for anything that might have put him in danger. They found several possibilities. 3 weeks before his disappearance, Marcus had been investigating a series of break-ins at local businesses. His notes found in his desk at the police station suggested he suspected the crimes were being committed by someone with inside knowledge, possibly someone connected to the business community itself. Marcus had also been asking questions about irregularities in the evidence room at the police station. Several items from recent drug arrests had gone missing, and Marcus had begun documenting the discrepancies in a private notebook that investigators found hidden in his locker. Most intriguingly, Marcus had been looking into allegations of corruption within the county sheriff's department. Anonymous tips had suggested that certain deputies were providing protection to drug dealers in exchange for payoffs. Marcus had compiled a list of suspicious arrest patterns and was planning to present his findings to Internal Affairs. Each of these leads seemed promising, but none led to concrete evidence of who might have abducted Marcus. The business break-ins stopped after his disappearance, but no arrests were ever made. The missing evidence was never recovered, and the investigation into police corruption stalled without Marcus's testimony. Meanwhile, the personal side of the investigation proved equally frustrating. Jenny Thompson submitted to multiple polygraph examinations, all of which she passed conclusively. Marcus's family members were investigated and cleared. His financial records showed no unusual activity, no secret debts, no hidden problems that might explain his disappearance. The investigation took a particularly dark turn when Agent Morrison began exploring the possibility that Marcus had been killed by a fellow police officer. The corruption allegations, combined with the professional manner in which the abduction had been carried out, suggested someone with law enforcement training might be involved. This theory led to uncomfortable confrontations within the Cedar Falls Police Department. Every officer who had worked with Marcus was questioned extensively. Their alibis were checked and double-checked. Patrol schedules were analyzed to determine who might have known Marcus's route that night. The investigation revealed tensions that few had suspected. Several officers resented Marcus's rapid promotion and his close relationship with Chief Hartley. Others were uncomfortable with his inquiries into the missing evidence and the corruption allegations. But resentment wasn't evidence, and no one could be definitively placed at the scene of Marcus's disappearance. 6 months into the investigation, Agent Morrison made a disturbing discovery. Security cameras at the high school, which should have recorded any activity in the parking lot where Marcus's patrol car was found, had been mysteriously disabled 3 days before his disappearance. The cameras had been professionally sabotaged, their wiring cut in a way that would prevent them from recording while still appearing to function normally. This revelation convinced investigators they were dealing with someone who understood police procedures and security systems. But it also meant they had lost their best chance of identifying Marcus's abductor. Whoever had taken him had planned the crime meticulously, eliminating potential evidence before carrying out the abduction. As 1983 dawned, the active investigation began to wind down. The FBI reduced their presence in Cedar Falls, leaving behind a file cabinet full of leads that had gone nowhere and theories that couldn't be proven. Chief Hartley continued to assign officers to follow up on tips and new information, but the trail had gone cold. The case that had begun with such urgency and hope was slowly becoming another unsolved mystery, another name on a list of people who had simply vanished without explanation. But for those who knew Marcus Thompson, the lack of answers only made their determination to find the truth stronger. The weeks turned to months and the months turned to years, but Cedar Falls never forgot Officer Marcus Thompson. His disappearance had torn a hole in the fabric of the small community, leaving behind questions that haunted everyone who had known him. Jenny Thompson became the unwilling face of the ongoing mystery. She refused to hold a memorial service, insisting that without a body, there was still hope that Marcus might return. She kept his belongings exactly as he had left them, maintained his workshop in the basement, and continued to set a place for him at the dinner table each night. The police department struggled with its own grief. Chief Hartley retired 2 years after Marcus's disappearance, telling colleagues he could no longer look at Marcus's empty desk every day. The new chief, brought in from outside the department, tried to maintain morale while dealing with ongoing suspicions that someone within the force might have been involved in Marcus's fate. Officer James Mitchell, who had discovered the abandoned patrol car, requested a transfer to the day shift. He told friends he couldn't patrol the streets at night anymore without thinking about Marcus and wondering if he might be next. Several other officers left the force entirely, seeking jobs in other towns where the memories wouldn't follow them. The case generated its share of amateur investigators and conspiracy theorists. A true crime writer from Chicago spent 3 months in Cedar Falls in 1985, interviewing residents and developing a theory that Marcus had uncovered a drug smuggling operation that reached into the highest levels of county government. Her book, published the following year, became a regional bestseller but provided no new evidence. Local teenagers created their own mythology around Marcus's disappearance. They claimed his ghost could be seen patrolling the high school parking lot on foggy nights, still searching for whatever had lured him from his patrol car. The story became a rite of passage for each new class of students, though it brought no comfort to those who had actually known Marcus. The annual police memorial service became a particularly painful reminder of the unsolved case. Each year, Chief Hartley's successor would read Marcus's name along with other fallen officers, but the absence of closure made the tribute feel incomplete. Jenny always attended, wearing the same black dress and sitting in the same front row seat, her presence both honoring Marcus's memory and questioning why his sacrifice remained unexplained. Media coverage of the case followed a predictable pattern. Each anniversary of Marcus's disappearance brought renewed attention, with newspaper articles rehashing the known facts, and television reporters interviewing family members who had nothing new to say. The coverage always ended with the same plea for information and the same promise that the case remained open and active. But as the years passed, even the anniversary coverage began to diminish. New crimes demanded attention. New mysteries captured the public imagination. Marcus Thompson's disappearance slowly faded from headline news to historical footnote, remembered primarily by those whose lives he had touched personally. The psychological toll on the community was immeasurable. Parents began driving their children to school instead of letting them walk, even in broad daylight. Residents installed new locks and security systems, suddenly aware that terrible things could happen even in their quiet small town. The innocence that had once characterized Cedar Falls was gone, replaced by a wariness that would never fully disappear. Perhaps most tragically, the case changed how people viewed their local police. The possibility that one of their own officers might have been involved in Marcus's disappearance cast a shadow over every interaction with law enforcement. Citizens who had once waved at patrol cars now watched them with suspicious eyes, wondering what secrets might be hiding behind the badge. Jenny Thompson aged visibly during these years of uncertainty. Friends watched as the vibrant young teacher became increasingly withdrawn and isolated. She continued working at the elementary school, but colleagues noticed she had lost her enthusiasm for the job she had once loved. She rarely smiled anymore, and when she did, it never reached her eyes. By 1990, 8 years after Marcus's disappearance, most people had accepted that the mystery would never be solved. The active investigation had long since ended. The evidence had been filed away, and life in Cedar Falls had settled into a new normal that included the permanent absence of Officer Marcus Thompson. But secrets have a way of surfacing when you least expect them, and sometimes the truth emerges from the most unlikely places. In Marcus's case, the breakthrough would come not from sophisticated police work or new forensic techniques, but from something as simple as a construction project that disturbed the wrong patch of ground. October 12, 2002. 20 years and 11 months after Marcus Thompson vanished from the streets he had sworn to protect, a bulldozer operator named Mike Carlson was clearing land for a new subdivision on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. The property, a forgotten tract of woods and farmland about 8 miles from the high school, had been purchased by a developer planning to build modest homes for young families. Carlson had been working the site for 3 days, pushing over trees and scraping away decades of accumulated brush and debris. It was routine work, the kind he'd done hundreds of times before. But at 2:30 that Tuesday afternoon, his bulldozer blade struck something that shouldn't have been there. At first, Carlson thought he'd hit an old septic tank or buried farm equipment. But as he climbed down to investigate, he realized he was looking at something far more sinister. Partially exposed in the disturbed earth was what appeared to be a section of black plastic sheeting, the heavy-duty kind used in construction projects. Something about the careful way the plastic had been folded and buried made Carlson uneasy. He'd worked construction long enough to know that legitimate burials, old fuel tanks, demolished building materials, were usually marked on property surveys. This wasn't on any of his maps. Carlson stopped his work and called his foreman, who took one look at the site and immediately contacted the Cedar Falls Police Department. By 4 p.m., the construction site had been transformed into a crime scene, complete with yellow tape and multiple patrol cars. The current police chief, Maria Santos, had been on the job for only 6 months, but she was well aware of the town's most famous cold case. As she watched investigators carefully excavate around the plastic sheeting, she couldn't help but wonder if they were finally about to answer questions that had haunted Cedar Falls for 2 decades. The excavation proceeded slowly and methodically. Crime scene technicians from the state police used hand tools and brushes to carefully expose whatever lay beneath the plastic. What they found confirmed everyone's worst fears and answered at least one of the questions that had tormented Marcus Thompson's family and friends. Wrapped in multiple layers of heavy plastic and buried approximately 4 feet underground were human remains. The skeleton was largely intact, still wearing the tattered remnants of what appeared to be a police uniform. A corroded badge, its numbers barely visible but still readable, confirmed the victim's identity. 247. Marcus Thompson. The discovery sent shockwaves through Cedar Falls. Within hours, news trucks from 3 states had converged on the quiet construction site. Jenny Thompson, now 42 years old and still living in the house she had shared with Marcus, collapsed when Chief Santos delivered the news personally. But the discovery of Marcus's remains, while providing some measure of closure, also raised new questions that were even more disturbing than his disappearance had been. The forensic examination, conducted by the state's top pathologist, revealed details about Marcus's final moments that painted a chilling picture of cold-blooded murder. Marcus had been shot 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. The forensic evidence suggested he had been killed somewhere else and then transported to the burial site. The careful wrapping and deep burial indicated significant planning and preparation. This wasn't a crime of passion or a robbery gone wrong. It was an execution. Most shocking of all was the discovery of Marcus's service weapon, buried alongside his body. The .38 revolver had been fired. 3 bullets were missing from the cylinder, but ballistics tests would later confirm that Marcus' own gun had not been used to kill him. Someone had taken his weapon, used it for an unknown purpose, and then buried it with his body as a final insult. The location of the burial site also provided new clues about the killer's identity. The land belonged to a family trust that had owned it for over 50 years. Access required either permission from the property owners or detailed knowledge of the area's back roads and logging trails. This wasn't a spot someone would choose at random. It was selected by someone who knew the area intimately. The discovery of Marcus Thompson's remains breathed new life into an investigation that had been dormant for nearly 2 decades. Chief Maria Santos assembled a task force that included FBI agents, state police detectives, and forensic specialists, all focused on solving a murder that had waited 20 years for justice. The investigation benefited from advances in forensic science that hadn't existed in 1982. DNA analysis of evidence found with Marcus' body yielded profiles that were run through national databases. New fingerprinting techniques were applied to items that had been processed decades earlier, with less sophisticated methods. But perhaps most importantly, the passage of time had changed the dynamics within the Cedar Falls Police Department. Officers who had been reluctant to speak openly in 1982 were now retired or dead. Loyalties that had once protected potential suspects were no longer as strong. People were finally ready to tell the truth. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Detective Sarah Chen, the daughter of the hospital worker who had reported seeing Marcus' patrol car on the night of his disappearance, had joined the Cedar Falls Police Department 5 years earlier. She brought to the investigation both fresh eyes and a personal connection to the case that had shaped her childhood. Working through old evidence files, Detective Chen noticed something that previous investigators had overlooked. The radio frequency change in Marcus's patrol car, the detail that had puzzled investigators for years, matched a frequency that had been used by the county sheriff's department for surveillance operations. This discovery led Chen to focus on the corruption allegations that Marcus had been pursuing at the time of his disappearance. She began interviewing retired sheriff's deputies, many of whom were now willing to discuss activities they had kept secret for decades. The story that emerged was uglier than anyone had imagined. In the early 1980s, a group of corrupt deputies had been operating a protection racket for drug dealers operating along the interstate highway that passed through the county. The operation was sophisticated and profitable, involving altered arrest reports, missing evidence, and warning systems that alerted dealers to impending raids. Marcus Thompson, with his methodical approach and incorruptible reputation, had posed a direct threat to the operation. His investigation had identified patterns that could have exposed the entire conspiracy. According to the retired deputies who finally agreed to speak, Marcus had been marked for elimination weeks before his disappearance. The actual murder had been carried out by Deputy Ronald Marsh, a 15-year veteran of the sheriff's department who had been the ringleader of the corruption scheme. Marsh had used his knowledge of police procedures to plan the perfect crime, luring Marcus to a secluded location, killing him efficiently and disposing of the body in a place where it might never be found. Unfortunately for the investigation, Ronald Marsh had died in a car accident in 1995, taking his secrets with him. Several other deputies who had been involved in the corruption scheme were also deceased. Those who remained alive claimed limited knowledge of the murder itself, though they admitted to being aware of the protection racket. The case presented prosecutors with a difficult challenge. While they had finally solved the mystery of what happened to Marcus Thompson, most of the perpetrators were beyond the reach of earthly justice. Only 2 living suspects could be charged with crimes related to Marcus's murder, and the evidence against them was largely circumstantial. In the end, former Deputy William Hayes was convicted of conspiracy and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Hayes had served as a lookout during Marcus's murder and had helped Marsh dispose of the body. His testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, provided the final pieces of the puzzle that had baffled investigators for 20 years. The trial brought some measure of closure to Marcus's family and friends, but it also revealed the full scope of the betrayal that had led to his death. Marcus Thompson had been killed not by criminals he was trying to arrest, but by fellow law enforcement officers he had trusted and worked alongside. Jenny Thompson, now 45 years old, attended every day of Hayes's trial. When the guilty verdict was announced, she wept not from joy but from a grief that had been renewed by finally knowing the truth. In a statement read outside the courthouse, she said that while she was grateful for justice, nothing could bring back the 20 years of uncertainty and pain that the corruption had cost her family. Today, more than 40 years after Marcus Thompson kissed his wife goodbye and headed out for what would be his final patrol, his story serves as a haunting reminder of the complex moral landscape that law enforcement officers navigate every day. His memorial plaque hangs in the lobby of the Cedar Falls Police Station, bearing a simple inscription, Officer Marcus Thompson, Badge 247, died in service to truth and justice. But Marcus's legacy extends far beyond the bronze plaque that bears his name. His story has become a cautionary tale about the dangers that officers face not just from the criminals they pursue, but sometimes from the corruption that can take root within their own ranks. It reminds us that the badge carries with it not just authority and responsibility, but also the potential for profound moral conflict. The investigation that led to Marcus's death began with his unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when it put him at odds with colleagues he had trusted. He could have looked the other way when evidence went missing from the police station. He could have ignored the suspicious patterns he noticed in arrest records. He could have chosen the easier path of silent complicity. Instead, Marcus chose to ask difficult questions and pursue uncomfortable truths. He chose to honor his oath to serve and protect, even when that oath put him in danger. In the end, that choice cost him his life, but it also revealed a character that remained uncompromised even in the face of ultimate betrayal. The corruption that Marcus uncovered, and that ultimately killed him, was not unique to Cedar Falls or even to that era of law enforcement. Similar scandals have emerged in communities across the country, reminding us that the potential for abuse exists wherever power is concentrated and oversight is limited. Marcus's story teaches us to remain vigilant, to ask questions, and to never assume that a badge automatically confers integrity. For the residents of Cedar Falls, Marcus's murder shattered their faith in institutions they had trusted without question. But it also showed them the importance of demanding accountability from those who serve in positions of authority. The town implemented new oversight procedures, citizen review boards, and transparency requirements that have become models for other small communities. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus Thompson's story reminds us that heroism is not always recognized in the moment it occurs. Sometimes, the greatest acts of courage happen in quiet moments, when individuals choose to do what is right, despite the personal cost. Marcus died not in a dramatic shootout with criminals, but because he refused to ignore corruption among his colleagues. His death raises questions that extend beyond law enforcement to every profession and every community. What do we owe to truth when speaking it puts us in danger? How do we balance loyalty to colleagues with responsibility to the public we serve? When does staying silent become complicity in the very crimes we are sworn to prevent? These questions have no easy answers, but Marcus Thompson's life and death suggest that integrity is not negotiable, that doing what is right matters more than doing what is safe, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not against strangers in dark alleys, but against the corruption that can take root in the institutions we trust most. As evening falls over Cedar Falls today, patrol officers still drive the same streets that Marcus Thompson once protected. They carry the same authority, face the same dangers, and confront the same moral choices that he faced 40 years ago. The difference is that they do so in a community that has learned through tragedy and loss that the price of freedom truly is eternal vigilance, not just against the criminals who threaten our safety, but against the corruption that can threaten our souls. Officer Marcus Thompson's watch has ended, but his example endures, challenging each of us to choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and justice over personal safety. In a world where it is often easier to look away than to speak up, his story reminds us why some fights are worth having, even when the cost is everything we hold dear.